Welcome back to the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith. And, well, you know, we say this every time, don't we? But this is a cracker. This book is called The Crying Tree. It's by Naseem Rakha. And it's an extraordinary story of loss and death and suffering and redemption, which I suppose sounds like any other novel, except this is special. Naseem, this was the first one that I actually read for the Richard and Judy Book Club, and it had me in tears.
Oh.
It was excellent. I mean, let's just summarise the story. There's a terrible murder.
Right.
A 15-year-old boy is shot and killed by seemingly a vagrant a few years older than him. That's kind of the start of the story. And the impact on his family is unbelievable. You know, his mother and father are ripped to shreds, his sister is in bits. And very soon after the killing, the perpetrator gives himself up. Mm-hmm. And that's where the mystery starts, because although he's swiftly convicted, and passed the death sentence by lethal injection.
And he's only 19.
And he's only 19, and it's the first time the state of Oregon has passed the death sentence for a long time. Nothing is as it seems. It's your first novel. These are big themes, you know, murder and the death sentence and death row and all of that as the whole story unfolds. What made you pick on this very tough fibre of a story?
Well, you know, it's because of my experience as a reporter. In Oregon, I covered Oregon's first execution that we held in over 34 years. And that was on September 9th, 1996.
Were you there for the execution?
You know, they brought all the reporters on board, and we had people from the BBC there, we had people internationally who came because it seems to be big news when we conduct an execution in the United States.
Well, it's almost unbelievable here. I mean,
right.
When they're, you know, we read about it. So you were covering this.
I was covering that, and then they chose four reporters from a pool. And I wasn't one of the four that actually witnessed the man die. Mm-hmm. But it was during those moments right before he died, and we were all on the prison grounds, I stepped outside the building that they had us in. And it was a misty night, and outside the prison gates, I could see two groups of people standing there, one holding candles, and their faces were reflected, you know, kind of like little moons, and they were silently standing there protesting the event. Mm-hmm. And then there was another group standing there, and they were acting as if they were at a party before a football game. You know, they were throwing firecrackers, they were chanting, they were singing, and they were celebrating. And I realized how inadequate I was going to tell the story the next day, because as reporters we were given very little to go on. We weren't allowed to speak with the convicted man. The witnesses didn't want to speak with us. Essentially all we got were props. This is the gurney that he'll be attached to. This is the room that he will walk into and never walk out of. We were given scripted press conference interactions. And I promised myself that one day in the future I would try to tell that story, but from the full perspective of what goes on in the United States when we wield our most potent and most severe sentence.
Well, you do it beautifully, Naseem. Considering this is a first novel, this is your first attempt at putting, you're a writer because you're a journalist, but actually writing a novel, it's an extraordinary accomplishment. And I have to say that your experience then speaks for itself, because a lot of the time when the prison authorities are talking to the local press and the national press about what's going to happen in the coming weeks, once the sentence is finally enacted, or about to be enacted, they talk about the procedure. Mm-hmm. It's never the death sentence, it's never the execution, it's the procedure.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? Because as the progress is made towards the actual execution, that's a major part of the story. The actual main part of the story is with the family of the murdered boy. But you can, I mean, certainly from a British perspective, as you write what happens, the procedure, the rehearsals, all that terrible, terrible stuff, you can't believe that decent human beings, which the director of the prison is, basically, can bear to go through it. And indeed, that's his big existential crisis as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that very much is.
Did you ever see The Green Mile, Stephen King's novel?
Yes, I saw that years ago.
Again, that juxtaposition of fundamentally decent human beings, but having to inflict this barbaric execution. What about the parent, the mother, though? Because she's one of the central figures, the mother of the boy who was killed. What's really interesting is the way she is so consumed with bitterness and hatred, right the way through the 19 years since her son was killed, and the day that his killer is scheduled for lethal injection. And there is the most extraordinary turnaround in the book, which is full of redemption at the end and peace. I mean, it's a sad ending, but it's in some ways it's a very lovely ending.
You're talking about the point where the mother decides that revenge isn't going to work for her. She has to forgive him. And that's an extraordinary place to bring a character like that. How did you develop that?
You know, I developed that because I met a woman who did that. Oh. And after I covered the death, that one execution, I began doing lots of interviews with people who had been involved in the death penalty and in capital punishment. I interviewed death row inmates who'd lived on, one of them who lived on death row for over 18 years and was later exonerated because he was innocent.
So he wasn't executed?
He was not executed. But one day, a woman asked me if I had met a friend of hers named Abigail, and I went up to Abigail and introduced myself, and she said, "Oh, you know, I'm a little tired right now, I can't really talk, but I'd love to talk with you at some time," because I told her I'm interested in the death penalty. She goes, "In fact, I've just driven 10 hours from San Quentin, which is death row in California." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yes, I was visiting a friend on death row." I said, "You have a friend on death row? That's interesting." She goes, "Yes, it was the man who killed my daughter 20 years ago."
Jeez.
And so I was stunned, you know. And
the journalist in you must have
caught
fire. Yeah.
Absolutely. So a week later, I was in her apartment with all my microphones, and for 3 hours, she told me the story of coming home. The phone was ringing. She picked it up, and it was a journalist asking her how she felt about the news that her daughter had been murdered. And she hadn't heard this news. And she told me about the years of bitterness and despair and hate and living for every morning, waking up with the only desire to watch that man walk into a gas chamber and never walk out.
Right.
And then one day, after 12 years of this bitterness just whittling her away to nothing, her relationships falling apart and whatnot, she came to the conclusion that she had to forgive the man in order to survive, to do it for herself. And when I left that interview, I was still perplexed. I still didn't understand it on any kind of visceral level, how you make that arc, how you make that change. And I thought perhaps if I explored it through fiction, by creating very real, very tangible characters that went through this, that perhaps I could understand it myself.
You've done it. You make what sounds like an impossible conundrum.
Could I just ask?
Just to say, you resolve it beautifully. You believe when you get to that point in the book, and it's not giving anything away to say that, because in the end she wants to campaign against the execution, which the devastating effect that has on her husband, on her daughter, who all along everybody's wanted this guy to be killed, and suddenly there's the mother saying, "No, we can't. We have to forgive him."
But just because I'm so intrigued now, I have to ask you the follow-up.
Right.
The man who killed this woman's daughter, was he eventually executed?
He's still on death row.
Still on death row?
He's still on death row.
And how many years has that been?
I think it's now 25 years.
Good grief.
Good God. And does the mother want him to face
No.
it? No longer.
No,
she wants him off death row.
No, she says it would be like another assassination in her life, another loss.
Well,
people have compared you, I think, to Jodie Picoult, because you both take real life, moral, very difficult situations and try to explore them. And in that, I mean, are you glad about? Is that a good comparison for you?
Well, I think it is a valid comparison, because we do look at modern day issues and how they affect families.
Yes.
And how do they build us up and how do they tear us apart.
Yeah.
Well, I must say, the way that this book ticks, because it starts off, the opening chapter starts with the date of the execution at last, after 19 years has been set, about 4 weeks ahead of time. And the book's, although it darts back in time, your timeline is that 4 weeks, and it counts down to the execution.
Right.
And I won't say if he is executed or not, that would be to give too much away. But as you get to these pages here, the tension is, you can cut with a knife, which is a terrible cliche, but what the hell. These cliches work, they tell the truth. And it finishes beautifully and believably, and many congratulations on a fine first novel.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
very, very
hopefully
much.
it'll be the first of many.
Yes, I'm working on it.
And the title, The Crying Tree, you get to that in about chapter 2, chapter 3. It's a beautiful, beautiful little picture. You'll read it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, when you've read The Crying Tree by Naseem Rakha, we'd love to hear your opinion of it. Obviously, you can post your own review on our website, and we'd also like to hear your opinions of all our books, all the 8 on our list, and which was your favourite.
And you can check out all the information about the book club as it stands with all 8 books on the website, which is www.WHSmith.co.uk/Richard and Judy. Lovely talking to you. Thanks for watching. Back soon with another one.